So let's add a quick reset signal to this D flip-flop. The behavior being basically when the reset is pressed, the D flip-flop will settle at a known value. So let's just do Q equals 0, right, when reset. And for this, the specific behavior that we will define is at the negative edge, of reset. So this is user definable. So as a programmer, you could define it as you wish. So I'll define it as a negative edge reset. So if reset equals 0, right? So if basically just bring it to a known state, and else, that is whenever in all other times, right, when the reset is not 0, then the default behavior of the flop remains, that is Q follows D. So there is one better way of writing this. There is a 1-bit value, 1 and then a apostrophe means 1-bit value, and this is what D basically stands for. Whatever comes next is the bit value. So for example, 4-bit 1011 is valid, right? So you could do 4H, for example, 4 octal, so and so on. So this is 1-bit value. This is the right way of doing this, and this is the D flip-flop with the reset. You have to do minor changes to the test bench of the D flip-flop, which I leave it to you as assignment. You guys can go ahead and do some modify the test bench such that properly test the reset, and reset it once, and then go ahead and then give the inputs to this new flip-flop. We will use this D flip-flop to build larger flip-flops next, right? We will next look at the modeling of the T flip-flop. The T in the T flip-flop stands for toggle. Toggle indicating the toggling behavior based on the toggle input to the flip-flop. The toggle flip-flop has a fairly simple behavior. If the toggle input is 0, then at the rising edge, the next clock cycle, the output will be the same as the previous clock cycle output. There is no change in the output. If toggle equals 1, then the output in the next clock cycle has to be the complement of the previous clock cycles. The implementation of the T flip-flop is also shown on the left hand side here. In the JK flip-flop, if the J and the K inputs are fused together, then we have the T flip-flop behavior. We'll show you a D flip-flop implementation of this. So here the Xor gate is input with the T and the current state of this sequential circuit. Right. The T flip-flop takes in one input T, of course generates the Q output and the clock, and we will also use the reset that we have just included into the T flip-flop. So the inputs are T, clock and reset, and the output is Q. Of course the output has to be of type reg because we are modeling a sequential circuit. So note that the T flip-flop has two parts, right? One is the sequential D flip-flop instantiation, and the other part is the Xor gate, which is the combinational logic. The portion of the Xor gate is we have to just model it as a combinational logic. So The XOR output is a wire that connects, the XOR output here is a wire that connects to the input to the D flip-flop. So we will need to declare a wire. So I just give a wire W1 for example, right? And I could say we've already done the XOR several times, so maybe just do the assign for wire 1 should be equal to T is one of the inputs, and I use the bitwise XOR operator here, and this output of the D flip flop, which is going to be Q, right? So this is it. This describes XOR. Alternatively, you could use the XOR keyword, and possibly just do this much, right? So D, Q, this will also work. So that is the combination logic part. The other half is the instantiation of the D flip flop itself, and we already have the D flip flop, right? In fact, yeah. So let me just use the D flip flop that we have written. This is the D flip flop that we have written already. So I just use this to instantiate. So this is the name of the module DFF. So I'll say DFF1. And Q is the input, is correct. D is the other, the input is W1. Right? So Q is the output. So Q is the output, W1 is the input, clock and reset are the other two inputs to this D flip flop. So that is it. So we have done all the connections, and we have now correctly described the D flip flop. So let me compile the D flip flop code. Verilog D flip flop.v. Unknown module type D flip flop in line number 14. So I have to also compile D flip flop together. Now there is an error in line number 14, which is the instantiation line. Reg Q cannot be driven by primitives. Okay, so the D flip flop instance output is a Q, right? So let's see that. Right, so the D flip flop output is Q, and the error is basically saying that to draw out the Q, I have to connect the output of the D flip flop to a wire here. So basically this was not required, so this was declared as a reg at the D flip flop, but at the D flip flop itself we are not writing sequential logic, we are only drawing out the output from the D flip flop, so that is why the reg here is not required. So output Q should be of type wire. So let me see if this, yeah, so now there is no error in the D flip flop code. So it compiles correctly. So let's now go ahead and write a simple test bench for this. So first of all, I will generate the reg and the output to be drawn out of this. So we now have a reset. So we'll have to write reset behavior. Of course, we have to also write the clock behavior, and of course the input behavior, which is behavior, so that is T behavior, and let's do that. So idea is to, at the beginning of the simulation, just generate the reset, and so I'll wait for a time unit and say reset equals 0. So if you remember, the D flip flop triggers the reset at a negative edge. So let's give it a negative edge, right? So let's say reset equals 1 at the beginning of the the simulation, and then the negative edge happens after one time unit, and wait for a time unit and then make it equal to 1 again, and it can be 1 for the rest of the simulation. So that is the reset behavior. Next is the clock behavior. We'll repeat the same that we have done for the previous sequential circuits. Say first of all begin with clock equal to 0, and let's say repeat for a few clock cycles, or let me just write forever, right? So forever, just for every 5 time units, just generate this clock. The next is the input behavior. We'll do say t equals in every clock cycle, right? So we're just trying to change the behavior of t in every clock cycle. So let's just code up this much. So I think this can be done using the repeat functionality, and say initially we'll give some value for t, let's say t equals 0, and maybe wait for say from 5 time units until the clock. So let me wait for 8 time units until the clock cycles, and then speed for say 10 clock cycles. There is just a single line here. So t equals 8 of t, and this can be done say once in 10 clock cycles, right? So once in 10 time units. So what has happened here is now inside the clock cycle t will change. So in fact it will change at 3 time units after the positive edge, if you correctly count, right? So make it change in first clock cycle, and then say do this. Yeah. This is the time period of the clock, right? 10 is the time period of the clock. So this is 3 time units after the pos edge, and yeah. So this is the behavior of the t input. So just to quickly see what actually happens, during the execution, I'll just say dump variables, and then just look at the output in GTK wave. Dump was everything from the top module. So this one, right? The dump file is say t clock or BCD. What is now remaining is to instantiate the design under test, and the instantiation is here. Let me just use this. So let's tf1 qt. So we have defined t behavior, clock behavior, and reset behavior. So let me see if this works now. These have to be inside the initial block. Sorry, that's in the block. Okay. There is no finish, so it's just getting stuck in an infinite loop. Maybe we'll put a finish and after 10 clock cycles, we'll put a finish here. Inside this t behavior always block, right? T behavior initial block. There was also an yeah, that's okay. So looks like dump file has to be called first, and then dump. Yeah, the error that was saying that the dump file has to be declared first and then dump files called. So let's see if that warning also goes out. Yeah, so that's done. So now I should have a taff.vct output. So let's see let's see the behavior now. Yes, we now have the output, and the clock, of course you can observe the clock is the 10 clock cycles in the first here. The T input, okay, so this is the reset input. The reset input goes from high to low here. Immediately after the reset input, the Q output is 0, right? At the pause edge, when T is 0, then Q will retain state, so nothing changes in this clock cycle, and before the next clock cycle begins, T is equal to 1, that is toggle output, so Q toggles here, Q toggles, and before the next pause edge, again T equals 0, Q retains a value 1 for the rest of the clock cycle, and just before the next pause edge, T equals 1, that is Q should toggle, and so Q changes value from 1 to 0. So this is the expected behavior, and yeah, that is the T flip-flops description. So yeah. After the T flip-flop, you can try out the JK flip-flop. Again, it's very similar to the T flip-flop. There is a combinational circuit that feeds to the D flip-flop sequential circuit, thereby correctly describing the JK flip-flop behavior. So I encourage you guys to go ahead and then model this block diagram that is on the screen right now. So that is it for the sequential circuits Verilog class now. Thank you.